This video contains audio content only. There are no visual elements or images accompanying the audio. If you're expecting to see video footage, please note that this is an intentional audio-only presentation. We recommend listening to this content rather than watching the screen. Thank you for your understanding and enjoy the audio. Welcome to our exploration of the fascinating world of the Canela people, an indigenous group living in the Brazilian Amazon. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into their unique culture, which offers us profound insights into alternative ways of organizing society, relating to nature, and finding meaning in life. The Canela challenge many of our assumptions about how human communities function and thrive. Imagine a society without bosses or strict hierarchies, where women own the homes and have high status, where plants are viewed as kin to be nurtured rather than resources to be exploited, and where elaborate rituals and festivals form the foundation of community life and governance. This is the world of the Canela. Over the next hour, we'll explore how the Canela's egalitarian social structure and matrilineal kinship system shape their daily lives and relationships. We'll look at their incredible ecological knowledge and subsistence gardening practices that allow them to cultivate hundreds of plant species in harmony with the Amazon environment. We'll delve into their spiritual beliefs and religious movements, including a dramatic messianic uprising in the 1960s. We'll examine how Canela culture has shown remarkable resilience and ability to adapt in the face of encroachment from the outside world, while still maintaining their core values and practices. The story of the Canela offers us a window into an entirely different way of being human, one that may hold important lessons for our own societies as we grapple with social inequality, environmental destruction, and loss of community. So join us on this journey to the heart of the Amazon and into the rich cultural world of the Canela people. You may never look at your own society the same way again. 1. Egalitarian social structure and matrilineal kinship. Let's begin by exploring one of the most striking aspects of Canela society, its remarkably egalitarian nature and focus on matrilineal kinship. Unlike the rigid hierarchies and patriarchal structures that dominate many societies, the Canela have developed a way of life that distributes power much more evenly and gives women a central role. At the heart of Canela social organization is the circular village. Picture a large open plaza surrounded by 50 to 60 thatched roof houses arranged in a perfect circle. This layout is no accident. It's a physical manifestation of Canela values of equality and community. There is no head house that's more prominent or important than the others. Each household has equal status and visibility within the village. Within these circular villages, Canela society is structured around matrilineal kinship. This means that descent and inheritance are traced through the female line. Children belong to their mother's lineage, not their father's. Property and ceremonial rights are passed down from mothers to daughters and from maternal uncles to nephews. This matrilineal system gives women a great deal of power and status in Canela society. Women own the houses and have primary rights over garden plots. When a couple marries, the husband typically moves into his wife's family's household. This matrilocal residence pattern means that groups of related women, sisters, mothers, daughters, aunts, live together and form the stable core of each household and lineage. The anthropologist William Crocker, who spent over 50 years studying Canela culture, described their society as relatively egalitarian, with minimal material resources and ceremonial hierarchy. There are chiefs and respected elders, but their authority is limited and based on custom rather than force. Important decisions are made collectively by village councils. This egalitarian ethos extends to the economic realm as well. The Canela have strong norms of sharing and generosity. Hoarding resources or accumulating much more wealth than one's neighbors is frowned upon. Food and other goods circulate widely through networks of kinship and ritual obligations. One fascinating aspect of Canela culture that reinforces social equality is their practice of formalized friendships. From a young age, each person establishes formal same-sex friendships with individuals from other lineages. These friends have ritual obligations to each other and serve as a way to create bonds across family lines. It's a social mechanism that prevents any one group from becoming too powerful or isolated. The Canela's egalitarian values are also reflected in their language. Their kinship terminology emphasizes equality between siblings and cousins. All women of the same generation in a lineage call each other sister, whether they are biological sisters or cousins. This linguistic practice reinforces the idea that all members of a generation have equal status. Of course, we shouldn't romanticize Canela society as a perfect utopia of equality. There are still status differences based on age, skill, and personality. Some individuals inevitably accumulate more influence than others. But compared to the stark inequalities that exist in many societies, the Canela have developed impressive cultural mechanisms for restraining hierarchy and promoting a more egalitarian social order. This egalitarian spirit is particularly evident in Canela politics and decision-making. Important matters are discussed and decided in daily meetings held in the central plaza. All adult men can participate and voice their opinions. Women don't typically speak at these gatherings, but they have significant behind-the-scenes influence through their control of households and their ability to sway their male relatives. Decisions are generally made by consensus rather than majority rule. The chief and elders guide discussions, but they can't simply impose their will. If consensus can't be reached, the matter is often tabled until another day. This process can be time-consuming, but it ensures that all voices are heard and prevents the concentration of too much power in any individual or faction. The Canela's egalitarian social structure offers a powerful counterexample to those who claim hierarchy and inequality are inevitable in human societies. It shows us that it's possible to organize communities in ways that distribute power and resources more evenly. As we grapple with rising inequality in many parts of the world, the Canela remind us that there are alternatives, that we have choices in how we structure our societies and economies. At the same time, we should recognize the challenges that come with maintaining such an egalitarian system, especially in the face of outside pressures. As the Canela have had increasing contact with Brazilian national society, new forms of inequality have emerged. Those with more education or Portuguese language skills can gain advantages. Access to wage labor and consumer goods has created economic disparities. The Canela are now grappling with how to maintain their egalitarian values while adapting to a changing world. It's a struggle that offers important lessons for all societies trying to balance equality and change, tradition and modernity. The Canela's experiments in egalitarian living are not just relics of the past. They are living examples that continue to evolve and offer insights for alternative futures. 2. Ecological knowledge and subsistence gardening practices. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most remarkable aspects of Canela culture: their profound ecological knowledge and sophisticated subsistence gardening practices. The Canela's approach to agriculture and resource management offers a powerful model of sustainable living in harmony with nature. Traditionally, the Canela were primarily hunter-gatherers, with gardening providing only about 20 to 25% of their diet. But over time, especially as their territories shrank due to encroachment, they've shifted to rely more heavily on cultivated foods. Today, gardening provides about 75% of their subsistence needs. But this is no ordinary agriculture. It's an intricate, biodiverse system that works with nature rather than against it. The Canela cultivate an astounding diversity of plants, over 300 varieties to meet their needs for food, medicine, and materials. This is a far cry from the monoculture farming that dominates much of modern agriculture. In a typical Canela garden, you might find dozens of varieties of manioc, sweet potatoes, yams, squash, peanuts, and maize all growing together. What's particularly fascinating is how the Canela view their relationship with these plants. They don't see themselves as farmers in the Western sense, dominating and controlling nature. Instead, they view gardening as a form of kinship and caretaking. Plants are considered kin, living relatives to be nurtured and cared for. Canela gardeners often refer to their seedlings and cuttings as babies, and their growing crops as infants. They speak of visiting their garden plots rather than working them. This perspective fosters a deep sense of connection and responsibility towards the plant world. The Canela's gardening practices are exquisitely attuned to the local environment. They use a slash and burn technique to clear small patches of land, but unlike many agricultural systems, they only use each plot for 2 years before allowing it to regrow for at least 8 years. This rotation system prevents soil depletion and allows the forest to regenerate. Their knowledge of plant companions and pest management is incredibly sophisticated. They know which plants grow well together, which ones repel harmful insects, and which ones attract beneficial pollinators. All of this is done without chemical fertilizers or pesticides. It's a completely organic system refined over generations. The Canela's approach to soil management is equally impressive. They recognize 10 different soil types in their territory and carefully match crops to the most suitable soils. They use various techniques to prevent erosion and maintain soil fertility, including strategic placement of certain plants known to fix nitrogen in the soil. What's particularly striking about Canela ecological knowledge is how it's transmitted and preserved. This isn't book learning, it's embodied knowledge passed down through hands-on experience and oral tradition. Children learn by working alongside their parents and grandparents in the gardens. There are specific rituals and songs associated with planting and harvesting that encode ecological information. The depth and breadth of this knowledge is astounding. In one study, Canela informants were able to name and describe the uses of over 250 plant species in a single day's walk through their territory. This included intricate details about growth patterns, habitat preferences, and interrelationships with other species. The Canela's ecological expertise extends far beyond just cultivated plants. They have extensive knowledge of wild plants, animals, and ecological relationships. They can read subtle signs in nature to predict weather patterns, animal movements, and optimal times for various activities. This holistic understanding of their environment allows them to live sustainably in a complex and sometimes harsh ecosystem. One particularly fascinating aspect of Canela ecological practice is their use of controlled burns. Far from being destructive, these carefully managed fires actually enhance biodiversity and ecosystem health. The Canela know exactly when and where to set small fires to clear underbrush, promote new growth, and create habitat for certain animals and plants. This traditional practice is now being studied by ecologists as a potential tool for forest management and fire prevention. The Canela's subsistence practices also involve sophisticated water management. They have extensive knowledge of the seasonal rhythms of rivers and streams in their territory. They create small dams and irrigation channels to direct water to their gardens during dry periods. These water management techniques allow them to grow crops year-round, even in areas with distinct wet and dry seasons. It's important to note that Canela ecological knowledge isn't static, it's constantly evolving and adapting. As new plants have been introduced to their region, the Canela have experimented and incorporated them into their agricultural system. They've also adapted their practices in response to environmental changes and the shrinking of their territories. The Canela's ecological expertise offers profound lessons for our modern world as we grapple with environmental degradation and the need for sustainable food systems. Their practices demonstrate that it's possible to meet human needs while enhancing rather than destroying biodiversity. They show us that ecological sustainability isn't just about technology, it's about cultivating a different relationship with the natural world. Imagine if we approached agriculture not as domination of nature, but as nurturing kin. What if we saw our role not as controlling the environment, but as participating in and enhancing natural processes? The Canela offer us a glimpse of what such a worldview looks like in practice. Of course, we can't simply transplant Canela practices to other contexts. Their system is intimately tied to their specific environment and cultural traditions. But we can certainly learn from their holistic approach, their emphasis on diversity, and their deep ecological knowledge. As we search for solutions to our environmental crises, the wisdom of indigenous peoples like the Canela may prove invaluable. 3. Spiritual beliefs and the 1963 Messianic movement. The spiritual life of the Canela is rich, complex, and deeply intertwined with their daily existence. Their beliefs and practices offer fascinating insights into how humans create meaning and navigate the mysteries of existence. But perhaps nothing illustrates the power and dynamism of Canela spirituality more vividly than the Messianic movement that swept through their communities in 1963. Traditionally, the Canela did not have a concept of gods or supernatural beings in the way many religions do. Their spiritual life was focused on maintaining harmony with the natural world and the spirit realm that permeates it. They believed in a vital force or essence that exists in all things, plants, animals, even inanimate objects. Rituals and practices were aimed at maintaining proper relationships with these various spirits and forces. Shamans played a crucial role in Canela's spiritual life. These individuals, who could be male or female, were believed to have the ability to communicate with spirits and navigate the unseen realms. They conducted healing ceremonies, interpreted dreams, and mediated conflicts between the human and spirit worlds. One of the most important spiritual concepts for the Canela is what they call karo, often translated as soul or vital essence. Every person is believed to have multiple karo, which can leave the body during sleep or in altered states. Illness is often attributed to soul loss, and shamanic healing involves retrieving and reintegrating lost karo. The Canela have a rich mythology that explains the origins of the world and their people. These stories often involve trickster figures and animal spirits who shaped the landscape and established cultural norms. These myths aren't just entertainment, they encode important ecological knowledge, ethical principles, and social rules. But Canela spirituality isn't a static, unchanging system. Like all aspects of their culture, it has evolved and adapted over time, especially in response to contact with outside influences. Which brings us to the extraordinary events of 1963. In that year, a married Canela woman named Ki Kwei began to have visions. She claimed that her unborn daughter was communicating with her from the womb, revealing prophecies about a coming transformation. The child, she said, would be born as a fully grown girl and would usher in a new era where the Canela would gain all the power and wealth of the white settlers, while the whites would be forced to live in the forest like the indigenous people had been. This messianic prophecy spread rapidly through Canela communities. Many saw it as a divine promise of liberation from the hardships and inequalities they had suffered under colonization. The movement gained momentum, with followers beginning to engage in new rituals and practices to prepare for the coming transformation. Ki Kwei's unborn child was said to be the sister of Aki, a mythical figure in Canela tradition who was associated with the origin of white people. According to legend, Aki was a miraculous indigenous child who was killed by his own people but then transformed into the first white man, offering the Canela access to the goods and technologies of the outside world. The 1963 movement was essentially a reenactment and inversion of this myth. It promised that Aki's sister would return to right the historical wrong, flipping the script so that the Canela would become the dominant civilization while whites were relegated to the forest. As the predicted birth date approached, excitement and tension mounted. Followers of the movement began to take livestock from local ranchers, believing that these animals rightfully belonged to them in the new order that was about to emerge. This, predictably, led to conflicts with non-indigenous settlers in the region. The climax of the movement came in May 1963, when Ki Kwei gave birth. But instead of the miraculous grown girl that had been prophesied, she delivered a stillborn boy. This tragic turn of events might have ended the movement then and there. But remarkably, it adapted and continued. The stillbirth was attributed to evil magic from an outsider, and new prophecies emerged saying that the transformation would still occur, just in a different form. The movement continued for several more months, with followers engaging in ecstatic dances and rituals aimed at bringing about the promised transformation. However, tensions with local ranchers eventually boiled over. In early July, a group of settlers attacked and burned a Canela village, killing 4 people. This violence marked the end of the active phase of the Messianic movement. To protect the Canela from further attacks, the Brazilian government's Indian Protection Service relocated them to a different reservation. But while the movement itself faded, its impacts on Canela culture and spirituality would be long-lasting. The 1963 Messianic movement offers a fascinating window into how indigenous spirituality can evolve and adapt in response to colonial pressures. It combined elements of traditional Canela mythology with Christian messianic themes, creating a unique syncretic belief system. This kind of creative spiritual adaptation is not uncommon among indigenous peoples facing existential threats to their way of life. What's particularly interesting about the Canela movement is how it used mythology as a template for action. The followers weren't just passively waiting for a miracle. They were actively trying to bring about the prophesied transformation through ritual and symbolic acts. This illustrates the power of myth not just as a story, but as a script for reshaping reality. The movement also reveals much about the psychological and social impacts of colonization on the Canela. The promise of a complete reversal of fortunes, with the Canela gaining all the power and wealth of white society, speaks to the deep sense of injustice and loss they felt. It was a way of imaginatively addressing the trauma of dispossession and marginalization. Moreover, the Messianic movement served as a form of cultural revitalization. It brought Canela communities together, reinforced traditional practices, and asserted indigenous identity in the face of outside pressures. Even though its specific prophecies weren't fulfilled, the movement strengthened Canela's social bonds and cultural pride. The aftermath of the 1963 events led to significant changes in Canela's spiritual life. While many traditional beliefs and practices continued, there was also an increased openness to outside religious influences. Some Canela began incorporating elements of Christianity into their worldview, creating new syncretic forms of spirituality. This spiritual evolution continues to this day. Modern Canela may blend traditional shamanic practices with Christian prayers, or reinterpret their myths in light of contemporary circumstances. This adaptability is a testament to the resilience and creativity of indigenous spirituality. It's crucial to understand that for the Canela, like many indigenous peoples, spirituality isn't a separate domain of life. It's intimately woven into every aspect of their existence, their ecology, their social relations, their politics. The Messianic movement wasn't just about religious beliefs, it was a holistic response to the challenges facing Canela society. Consider, for example, how the movement interacted with Canela ecological practices. Some followers believed that the coming transformation would make their traditional subsistence activities unnecessary. They would soon have access to all the goods of white society. This led to temporary neglect of gardens and hunting grounds. But when the prophecies weren't immediately fulfilled, the Canela quickly returned to their sustainable practices, demonstrating the deep roots of their ecological knowledge. The 1963 movement also had significant impacts on Canela's social and political organization. It temporarily disrupted traditional leadership structures as followers rallied around the prophetess Kikwe. This created tensions within the community, particularly between those who embraced the movement and those who were more skeptical. In the long term, however, these disruptions may have actually strengthened Canela's social resilience. The experience of the Messianic movement, and its ultimate failure, led to renewed appreciation for traditional Canela values of consensus building and community harmony. It also spurred new forms of political organization as the Canela sought to assert their rights and protect their lands in the aftermath of the crisis. One of the most poignant aspects of the 1963 movement was its focus on Canela children. The promised miraculous child who would lead the transformation never materialized, but the movement's emphasis on youth as agents of change had lasting effects. In subsequent years, there was increased focus on educating young Canela and preparing them to navigate both traditional and modern worlds. It's tempting to see the 1963 Messianic movement as a failure because its specific prophecies weren't fulfilled. But this would be a misunderstanding of how such movements function in indigenous contexts. The real significance lies not in whether the predicted events occurred, but in how the movement mobilized the community, reinforced cultural identity, and catalyzed adaptation to changing circumstances. Indeed, we can see echoes of the 1963 movement in contemporary Canela efforts to assert their rights and preserve their culture. While they may not be expecting a miraculous transformation, many Canela are actively working to reclaim their lands, revitalize their language, and gain greater autonomy within Brazilian society. The story of the 1963 Messianic movement reminds us that indigenous spirituality is not a relic of the past, but a living, evolving force that continues to shape how people understand and interact with their world. It challenges us to reconsider our own assumptions about the relationship between belief and action, myth and reality, tradition and innovation. As we grapple with global challenges that require new ways of thinking and being, perhaps we have something to learn from the Canela's ability to reimagine their world in times of crisis. Their experience shows us the power of collective imagination to fuel resilience and transformation, even in the face of overwhelming odds. 4. Cultural resilience and adaptation to outside pressures. The story of the Canela people is not just one of unique cultural practices, but also of remarkable resilience in the face of tremendous external pressures. Over the past 2 centuries, the Canela have confronted challenges that would have destroyed many societies, yet they have managed to maintain their core identity and values while adapting to a rapidly changing world. Their journey offers profound insights into the nature of cultural resilience and the complex process of negotiating tradition and change. The Canela's first significant contact with outside society came in the early 19th century, when conflicts with expanding Brazilian settlements led to their pacification in 1814. This marked the beginning of a long period of upheaval and loss. The Canela were pushed off much of their traditional lands, exposed to new diseases, and subjected to economic exploitation. By the 1930s, when the German-Brazilian anthropologist Kurt Nimwendiju began his groundbreaking studies, the Canela population had been reduced to around 300 people. Many observers at the time predicted their culture would soon disappear entirely, absorbed into the mainstream of Brazilian society. Yet the Canela defied these predictions. Not only did they survive as a distinct people, but their population began to rebound. Today, there are over 3,000 Canela, living primarily in 2 communities, the Ramcocamecra and the Accompanying. While they have certainly changed and adapted, they have maintained a strong sense of identity and many core cultural practices. How did they manage this feat of cultural survival? Several factors seem to have been crucial. First, the Canela's strong sense of community and egalitarian social structure provided a solid foundation for collective resilience. Their practice of making decisions by consensus, for instance, allowed them to navigate challenges as a unified group rather than fracturing under pressure. The Canela's matrilineal kinship system also proved to be a source of stability. With women owning the houses and controlling key resources, there was a continuous thread of cultural transmission even when male leaders were co-opted or removed by outside forces. Another key factor was the Canela's deep ecological knowledge and sustainable subsistence practices. Even as they lost access to much of their traditional territory, they were able to adapt their gardening and foraging techniques to new circumstances. This allowed them to maintain a degree of self-sufficiency and food security even in the face of economic pressures. The Canela's spiritual beliefs and practices also played a crucial role in their resilience. As we saw with the 1963 Messianic movement, they were able to creatively reinterpret their mythology and rituals to make sense of new situations and mobilize collective action. This spiritual adaptability provided a source of meaning and hope even in dire circumstances. But perhaps most importantly, the Canela demonstrated a remarkable ability to selectively adopt and adapt elements of outside culture without losing their core identity. They learned Portuguese, engaged in trade with surrounding communities, and even sent some children to schools in nearby towns. But they did so on their own terms, carefully filtering which aspects of outside culture to incorporate. For instance, when the Brazilian Indian Protection Service (SPI) established a post near their village in 1938, the Canela engaged with the agents but maintained their own governance structures. They took advantage of access to Western medicine but continued to practice traditional healing alongside it. They adopted some aspects of Christianity but integrated them into their existing spiritual framework rather than abandoning their beliefs. This selective adaptation is evident in many aspects of modern Canela life. Take their approach to technology, for example. The Canela have embraced certain technologies that they find useful, like flashlights for night hunting or radios for communication. But they've resisted technologies that they see as potentially disruptive to their social fabric, like television. The Canela's resilience has also been bolstered by their ability to form strategic alliances with outsiders who respect their culture. Anthropologists like William Crocker, who spent over 50 years studying and advocating for the Canela, played a crucial role in helping them navigate interactions with the Brazilian government and wider society. In the 1970s, the Canela formed partnerships with NGOs and indigenous rights organizations to push for legal recognition of their lands. This culminated in the official demarcation of the Canela Indigenous Territory in 1983, covering 125,212 hectares. While this is only a fraction of their original territory, it provided a crucial legal foundation for maintaining their way of life. The Canela have also shown remarkable adaptability in their economic practices. As hunting became less viable due to deforestation and encroachment, they intensified their agriculture and developed new sources of income. Some Canela now sell handicrafts or work as teachers in bilingual schools on their reservation. A few have even pursued higher education and professional careers while maintaining strong ties to their community. However, it's important to note that this cultural resilience has not come without costs and ongoing challenges. The Canela continue to face threats from illegal logging, mining interests, and agricultural expansion. Climate change is affecting their traditional ecological knowledge and subsistence practices. And the allure of mainstream Brazilian society, especially for young people, creates ongoing tension between tradition and modernity. Moreover, some aspects of traditional Canela culture have been lost or significantly altered. Their language, while still spoken by most community members, is under pressure from Portuguese. Some rituals and practices have been abandoned or simplified. And their social structure has become more stratified as some individuals gain advantages through education or outside employment. Yet even in the face of these challenges, the Canela continue to find creative ways to assert their identity and values. In recent years, they've been at the forefront of indigenous rights movements in Brazil, using social media and political organizing to advocate for their interests. They've also been involved in cultural revitalization efforts, documenting their traditions and teaching them to younger generations. One particularly inspiring example is the Canela's involvement in environmental conservation efforts. Drawing on their deep ecological knowledge, they partnered with scientists and NGOs to protect biodiversity in their territory. They're not just preserving their land for themselves, but contributing to global efforts to combat climate change and preserve the Amazon ecosystem. The Canela's journey offers important lessons for other indigenous communities facing similar pressures, and indeed for all societies grappling with rapid change. It shows that cultural resilience isn't about rigid preservation of tradition, but about maintaining core values and identity while flexibly adapting to new circumstances. The Canela experience also challenges simplistic notions of progress and development. They've shown that it's possible to engage with the modern world without wholly abandoning traditional ways of life. Their selective adoption of outside elements demonstrates that cultures can chart their own paths of development, rather than following a single, Western-defined trajectory. As we face global challenges that require new ways of thinking about community, sustainability, and human-nature relationships, the Canela's resilience and adaptability offer valuable insights. Their ability to maintain strong social bonds, live sustainably with their environment, and creatively respond to change provides a model of resilience that we would do well to learn from. The story of Canela cultural resilience is still unfolding. As they continue to navigate the complexities of the 21st century, they remind us that culture is not a static artifact to be preserved, but a living, evolving process of collective adaptation and creativity. In their ongoing journey, the Canela offer hope and inspiration for indigenous rights, cultural diversity, and sustainable living in our rapidly changing world. 5. Gender relations and women's status. One of the most fascinating aspects of Canela society is the high status and central role of women. In many ways, Canela gender relations offer a stark contrast to the patriarchal norms that dominate much of the world. Understanding the position of women in Canela culture provides valuable insights into alternative ways of organizing gender roles and family life. At the heart of Canela gender relations is their matrilineal and matrilocal social structure. As we discussed earlier, descent and inheritance are traced through the female line, and when a couple marries, the husband typically moves into the wife's family's household. This gives women a great deal of power and stability within the community. Women in Canela society own the houses and have primary rights over garden plots. This economic control is a key source of their authority and independence. A Canela woman is not economically dependent on her husband. In fact, it's often the reverse, with men relying on their wives and female relatives for access to resources. The importance of women in Canela society is reflected in their origin myths. Many of their stories about the creation of the world and the origins of cultural practices feature female protagonists. This contrasts sharply with the male-centric creation myths found in many other cultures. Canela women play central roles in many important rituals and ceremonies. For example, in the Kituwe initiation festival, It is women who formally end the seclusion of the young initiates and reintegrate them into society. Women also have their own societies and ritual groups, which perform important functions in community life. Perhaps most strikingly, Canela culture traditionally had very open and positive attitudes towards female sexuality. Before sustained contact with outside society, extramarital sex was not only accepted but often encouraged for both men and women. Women had a high degree of sexual autonomy and were not expected to be monogamous. In fact, the Canela had a custom called sequential marriages, where a woman would have sexual relations with multiple partners over the course of a festival. This was seen as a way of creating social bonds and distributing paternity among multiple men. The children resulting from these unions were considered to have multiple fathers, all of whom had responsibilities towards them. This sexual openness was not just about pleasure or social bonding. It was tied to Canela beliefs about conception and the nature of personhood. They believed that a child was formed through multiple acts of intercourse, with different men contributing different aspects to the developing fetus. This belief system fundamentally shaped their understanding of parenthood and family structure. It's important to note, however, that Canela society was not a matriarchy in the sense of women dominating men. Rather, it was, and to a large extent still is, a system of complementary roles where both genders had important spheres of influence and authority. Men, for instance, traditionally had more visible roles in public political discussions and in certain ritual activities. They were the primary hunters and were responsible for clearing new garden plots. But these male domains of authority existed alongside, not above, female spheres of power. The high status of women in Canela society had profound effects on family dynamics and child-rearing practices. Children were raised not just by their biological parents, but by an extended network of maternal relatives. This created strong bonds of kinship and mutual support that extended far beyond the nuclear family. Interestingly, despite their matrilineal system, the Canela did not have a concept of exclusively female inheritance or leadership. Important ritual knowledge and roles were often passed down from maternal uncles to nephews, creating a balance of male and female influences in the transmission of cultural knowledge. The status of women in Canela society has inevitably been affected by increased contact with Brazilian national society and global influences. The introduction of Christianity, for instance, has led to more restrictive attitudes towards sexuality in some quarters. Economic changes have altered traditional patterns of resource control, and exposure to mainstream Brazilian gender norms has created new pressures and expectations. However, many core aspects of Canela gender relations have proved remarkably resilient. Women continue to play central roles in community decision-making and resource management. The matrilocal residence pattern remains strong, ensuring that women maintain close ties with their female relatives throughout their lives. One area where change has been particularly complex is in the realm of leadership and representation. As the Canela have had to engage more with outside political and legal systems, there's been pressure to designate official, chiefs, or representatives, roles that have often been filled by men due to their greater familiarity with Portuguese and Brazilian institutions. Yet Canela women have found ways to assert their influence in these new contexts. Many have become teachers in bilingual schools on the reservation, a role that carries significant prestige and influence. Some have taken on leadership roles in cultural preservation efforts, documenting traditional knowledge and practices. And a few have even pursued higher education and professional careers, bringing new skills and perspectives back to their communities. The resilience of Canela women's status is perhaps most evident in the realm of family life and child rearing. Despite external pressures, the extended family network centered around maternal relatives remains the core unit of Canela's social organization. Children are still raised communally, with multiple mothers and fathers contributing to their care and education. This system of collective child rearing has significant implications for gender equality. It allows women to participate fully in community life and economic activities without being solely burdened with childcare responsibilities. It also ensures that children grow up with diverse role models and a strong sense of community belonging. The Canela approach to gender relations offers some powerful lessons for other societies grappling with issues of gender equality. It demonstrates that patriarchy is not an inevitable feature of human society, and that it's possible to organize family and community life in ways that give women significant power and autonomy. Moreover, the Canela example shows how gender equality can be deeply integrated into a society's worldview and practices, rather than being an external imposition or afterthought. Their beliefs about conception, their kinship system, their economic practices, and their spiritual traditions all reinforce the importance and power of women. At the same time, the Canela remind us that gender equality doesn't have to mean erasing all distinctions between male and female roles. Their society recognizes and values the contributions of both genders, creating a system of complementarity rather than hierarchy. Of course, it would be a mistake to romanticize Canela gender relations as perfect or problem-free. Like all societies, they grapple with conflicts, inequalities, and challenges. The pressures of acculturation have created new forms of gender disparity, particularly in interactions with the outside world. And individual personalities and circumstances can always lead to abuses of power, regardless of cultural norms. Moreover, some aspects of traditional Canela gender relations might be challenging for outsiders to accept. Their open attitudes towards sexuality, for instance, or their beliefs about multiple paternity, might seem strange or even problematic from other cultural perspectives. Yet even with these caveats, the Canela offer a powerful example of alternative possibilities in gender relations. They challenge us to question our assumptions about what's natural or inevitable in the relations between men and women. They show us that it's possible to create social systems that value and empower women while also recognizing the importance of men's contributions. As global movements for gender equality continue to gain momentum, the Canela experience offers valuable insights. It reminds us that true equality isn't just about changing laws or policies, but about fundamentally rethinking our concepts of family, community, and human nature itself. The story of Canela women also highlights the importance of economic autonomy in maintaining women's status. Their control over houses and agricultural lands provides a material basis for their social power. This underscores the often overlooked link between economic systems and gender relations. Furthermore, the Canela approach to sexuality and reproduction offers a radical challenge to many common assumptions. Their traditional views on multiple paternity and sexual openness suggest very different ways of thinking about family, parenthood, and social bonds. While these practices have been modified due to outside influences, they still inform Canela attitudes and social structures. As the Canela continue to navigate the complexities of the modern world, the status and roles of women will undoubtedly continue to evolve. But the deep-rooted respect for women's power and contributions that characterizes their culture provides a strong foundation for ongoing gender equality. In a world still struggling with pervasive gender inequality, the Canela offer an inspiring example of alternative possibilities. They remind us that the empowerment of women is not just a modern ideal, but a reality that some societies have long embraced as fundamental to their way of life. 6. Rituals, festivals, and community governance. The heart of Canela's social and spiritual life beats to the rhythm of their elaborate rituals and festivals. These events are far more than mere entertainment or religious observance. They are the very fabric that weaves together Canela society, reinforcing social bonds, transmitting cultural knowledge, and providing a framework for community governance. The Canela ritual calendar is rich and complex, with major festivals lasting weeks or even months. These events involve the entire community and require extensive preparation and coordination. One of the most important is the Kituwe, an initiation festival for young men that can last up to 3 months. During the Kituwe, initiates are secluded in a special house on the outskirts of the village. They undergo various trials and receive instruction in Canela lore and traditions. The festival culminates in a dramatic reintegration ceremony where the young men race into the village circle, symbolically reborn as adult members of the community. What's particularly fascinating about the Kituwe and other Canela rituals is how they blend spiritual beliefs, social organization, and practical education. While secluded, the initiates learn crucial survival skills like hunting and food preparation. They also receive instruction in Canela history, mythology, and ethical norms. The ritual thus serves as a comprehensive educational system, ensuring the transmission of both practical and cultural knowledge to the next generation. Another major festival is the Fish Festival, which can last up to 4 months. This event is tied to the seasonal spawning of fish in nearby rivers and involves elaborate preparations and rituals. During the festival, the entire community moves to a special camp near the river, where they engage in communal fishing, feasting, and ceremony. The Fish Festival illustrates how Canela rituals are intimately tied to their ecological knowledge and subsistence practices. The timing and structure of the festival are based on deep understanding of local fish species and their spawning patterns. The communal fishing techniques used during the festival are highly sophisticated, involving the construction of dams and fish traps that require coordinated effort from the entire community. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Canela festivals is their role in community governance and conflict resolution. Many of these events include formal periods for addressing disputes and making collective decisions. The festive atmosphere and ritual structure provide a context where conflicts can be aired and resolved without disrupting overall community harmony. For example, during the Pepi festival, there is a phase called the War Council, where grievances can be aired and settled. Disputants present their cases before the community, and decisions are made through a process of consensus building guided by respected elders. This integration of conflict resolution into ritual practice helps maintain social cohesion and prevents disputes from festering. The governance function of Canela rituals extends beyond just conflict resolution. Many festivals include elements that reinforce and renew social bonds between different segments of the community. For instance, there are rituals that emphasize the connections between age sets, strengthening intergenerational ties. Other ceremonies focus on renewing the bonds between different extended family groups or ritual societies. One particularly interesting governance mechanism embedded in Canela ritual is the system of formal friendships. During certain festivals, individuals establish ritual friendship bonds with members of other lineages or moieties, social divisions. These friendships come with specific obligations and rights, creating a web of reciprocal relationships that cut across family lines and help integrate the community. The physical layout of Canela rituals is also significant for community governance. Most major ceremonies take place in the central plaza of the village, with different groups occupying specific positions around the circle. This spatial arrangement is a physical manifestation of Canela's social structure, reinforcing each group's place in the overall community. Moreover, the preparation and execution of these complex rituals require extensive cooperation and coordination. This process itself serves as a form of governance, as community members must work together, make collective decisions, and resolve any conflicts that arise in the course of festival preparations. Canela rituals also play a crucial role in regulating resource use and economic activity. Many festivals include elements of redistribution, where accumulated goods are shared among community members. This helps prevent excessive inequality and reinforces norms of generosity and mutual support. For instance, successful hunters are expected to share their catch during certain rituals. There are also ceremonies where individuals who have accumulated wealth are expected to sponsor feasts or gift-giving events. These practices create a form of ritual leveling that helps maintain the Canela's relatively egalitarian social structure. The spiritual aspects of Canela rituals are equally important for community cohesion and governance. Many ceremonies involve communication with the spirit world, often mediated by shamans. These spiritual practices provide a shared cosmological framework that underpins Canela ethical norms and social organization. For example, the Canela believe that certain rituals are necessary to maintain the proper order of the universe and ensure the well-being of the community. This belief creates a powerful motivation for collective action and adherence to social norms. If rituals are not performed correctly, it is believed that crops might fail, game animals might disappear, or sickness might strike the village. Interestingly, Canela rituals have shown remarkable adaptability in the face of cultural change. While some practices have been abandoned or modified due to outside pressures, many core elements have been maintained or creatively reinterpreted. For instance, when the Canela were forcibly relocated in the 1960s following conflicts with local ranchers, they managed to adapt their ritual cycle to their new environment. They modified certain practices to fit their changed circumstances while maintaining the essential structure and meaning of the rituals. This adaptability extends to the incorporation of new elements into traditional rituals. Some Canela festivals now include elements drawn from Brazilian national culture or Christianity, but these are integrated in ways that align with traditional Canela values and practices. The resilience and adaptability of Canela ritual practices offer important lessons for other societies grappling with rapid cultural change. They demonstrate how traditional forms of community governance can evolve to meet new challenges while maintaining core cultural values. Moreover, the Canela example shows how ritual and governance can be deeply intertwined, creating a holistic system that integrates spiritual beliefs, social organization, economic practices, and political decision-making. This contrasts sharply with the compartmentalized approach to governance often seen in modern nation-states. As we face global challenges that require new forms of collective action and decision-making, the Canela model of ritual governance offers intriguing possibilities. While their specific practices might not be directly applicable to other contexts, their approach suggests ways of creating more integrated, participatory forms of community organization. The Canela's ritual-based governance also challenges us to reconsider the role of ceremony and collective experience in political life. In many modern societies, governance is seen as a purely rational, bureaucratic process. The Canela remind us that effective governance also involves emotion, symbolism, and shared spiritual experience. Of course, it's important not to romanticize Canela ritual governance. Like all systems, it has its limitations and challenges. The time and resources required for elaborate rituals can be burdensome, especially in times of scarcity. And the consensus-based decision-making process, while inclusive, can sometimes be slow and inefficient. Moreover, as the Canela engage more with outside political and economic systems, they face challenges in reconciling their traditional forms of governance with the demands of the Brazilian state and global capitalism. Finding ways to maintain the essence of their ritual-based community organization while adapting to these new realities is an ongoing process. Despite these challenges, the Canela's system of ritual governance remains a powerful example of alternative possibilities in community organization. It reminds us that effective governance is not just about rules and institutions, but about creating shared experiences that reinforce social bonds and collective values. As we search for new ways to build resilient, sustainable communities in the face of global challenges, the Canela offer valuable insights. Their rituals and festivals show us how spiritual practices, social organization, and political decision-making can be woven together into a holistic system of community governance that has stood the test of time. 7. Land rights struggles and interactions with Brazilian society. The story of the Canela people's relationship with the broader Brazilian society is one of resilience, adaptation, and ongoing struggle. At its core, this relationship revolves around the fundamental issue of land rights. The Canela's fight to maintain control over their ancestral territories in the face of encroachment, exploitation, and changing national policies. The Canela's first significant contact with Brazilian colonial society came in the early 19th century, as the expanding frontier of cattle ranching pushed into their territories. This period was marked by violent conflicts, as the Canela resisted incursions onto their lands. In 1814, facing mounting pressure, the Canela agreed to a pacification agreement with Portuguese authorities. This agreement marked the beginning of a long period of dispossession and marginalization. Over the next century, the Canela lost control of around 90% of their traditional lands. They were pushed into ever smaller areas, often the least productive lands that the settlers didn't want. Despite these losses, the Canela managed to maintain a degree of autonomy and cultural continuity. They adapted their subsistence practices to their reduced territories, intensifying their agriculture and developing new economic strategies. They also maintained diplomatic relations with surrounding Brazilian communities, engaging in trade and labor exchange while trying to protect their core lands and cultural practices. The situation began to change in the 1940s with the creation of the Indian Protection Service, SPI, by the Brazilian government. While ostensibly aimed at protecting indigenous rights, the SPI's policies were often paternalistic and focused on civilizing indigenous peoples rather than preserving their cultures. For the Canela, this period brought increased outside interference in their affairs, but also some benefits. The SPI established a post near their main village, providing some protection against encroachment and access to Western medicine and other goods. However, this also accelerated the pace of cultural change and created new forms of dependency. A crucial turning point came in 1963 with the Messianic movement we discussed earlier. The movement's followers, believing in an imminent transformation that would give them power over white society, began taking cattle from neighboring ranches. This led to violent retaliation, with ranchers burning a Canela village and killing several people. In the aftermath of this crisis, the Brazilian government relocated the Canela to a Guajajara indigenous reserve in a different ecological zone. This forced relocation was traumatic for the Canela, separating them from their ancestral lands and forcing them to adapt to an unfamiliar forest environment. However, the Canela's resilience shone through once again. They maintained their cultural practices in their new location and continued to press for the right to return to their traditional lands. After 5 years, they were finally allowed to return, though to a much reduced territory. The 1970s marked the beginning of a new phase in the Canela's struggle for land rights. This period saw the rise of the indigenous rights movement in Brazil and increased international attention to the plight of Amazonian peoples. The Canela began to engage more actively with these broader movements, forming alliances with NGOs and indigenous rights organizations. A major victory came in 1983 with the official demarcation of the Canela Indigenous Territory. This gave the Canela legal recognition of their right to 125,212 hectares of land. While this represented only a fraction of their original territory, it provided crucial legal protection and a base for maintaining their way of life. However, the demarcation of their lands did not end the Canela's struggles. They have faced ongoing challenges from illegal logging, mining interests, and agricultural expansion. Climate change is also affecting their environment, altering rainfall patterns and impacting their traditional ecological knowledge. Moreover, the Canela have had to navigate complex relationships with various arms of the Brazilian state. While some government agencies have supported indigenous rights, others have pursued policies that threaten Canela lands and autonomy. The frequent shifts in Brazilian politics have created a constantly changing landscape that the Canela must adapt to. One of the most significant challenges has been education. The Brazilian government has pushed for the establishment of schools in indigenous communities, which has brought both opportunities and challenges. While access to education has provided new skills and opportunities for young Canela, it has also created tensions between traditional knowledge systems and Western-style education. The Canela have responded creatively to these challenges. They've developed bilingual education programs that teach both Portuguese and the Canela language. They've incorporated traditional ecological knowledge into school curricula. And they've trained Canela teachers who can bridge the gap between traditional and Western knowledge systems. Another complex area of interaction with Brazilian society has been healthcare. The Canela have benefited from access to Western medicine, which has contributed to population growth and improved health outcomes. However, they've also worked to maintain their traditional healing practices, creating a syncretic system that combines elements of both approaches. In recent years, the Canela have become increasingly savvy in their engagements with Brazilian society and global networks. They've used media attention and political organizing to advocate for their rights. Some Canela have pursued higher education and professional careers, bringing new skills and perspectives back to their communities while maintaining strong cultural ties. One particularly innovative strategy has been the Canela's engagement with environmental conservation efforts. Recognizing that their interests align with global concerns about deforestation and biodiversity loss, they've partnered with scientists and environmental organizations to protect their territories. This has not only helped preserve their lands but has also brought positive attention and resources to their communities. For example, the Canela have worked with researchers to document the rich biodiversity of their lands, including several species previously unknown to science. They've also participated in projects to monitor deforestation using satellite technology, combining their intimate knowledge of the land with modern tools. These conservation partnerships have had multiple benefits. They've strengthened the Canela's legal claims to their territories by demonstrating their role as effective environmental stewards. They've provided economic opportunities through ecotourism and payments for ecosystem services. and they've helped the Canela gain allies in their ongoing struggles against encroachment and resource exploitation. However, these engagements with outside entities have also brought new challenges. The Canela have had to navigate complex relationships with researchers, NGOs, and government agencies, each with their own agendas and ways of working. They've had to find ways to participate in these partnerships while maintaining control over their lands and cultural knowledge. One particularly sensitive issue has been the sharing of traditional ecological knowledge. While the Canela recognize the value of their knowledge for conservation efforts, they're also wary of exploitation. They've had to develop protocols for sharing information that protect their intellectual property rights and ensure that benefits flow back to their communities. The Canela's interactions with Brazilian society have also been shaped by broader political and economic trends. The growth of agribusiness in the Cerrado region where they live has intensified pressure on their lands. Changes in Brazilian indigenous policy, which have swung between protectionist and assimilationist approaches, have created a constantly shifting legal and political landscape. During the administration of President Jair Bolsonaro, 2019 to 2022, the Canela, like many indigenous groups in Brazil, faced increased threats to their land rights and cultural autonomy. Bolsonaro's policies aimed to open up indigenous lands for commercial exploitation and weaken environmental protections. This created new urgency in the Canela's efforts to defend their territories and rights. In response to these threats, the Canela have become more active in national and international indigenous rights movements. They've participated in protests in Brasilia, the nation's capital, and sent representatives to international forums like the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. These engagements have helped them build solidarity with other indigenous groups and gain international support for their cause. The Canela have also embraced new technologies as tools for cultural preservation and advocacy. They've used social media to share their stories and raise awareness about threats to their lands. Some young Canela have become skilled in video production, creating documentaries that showcase their culture and challenges. One particularly innovative project has been the creation of a Canela cultural archive. Working with anthropologists and digital heritage experts, they've digitized recordings, photographs, and artifacts collected over decades of research. This archive serves multiple purposes, preserving cultural knowledge for future generations, providing educational resources for Canela schools, and showcasing Canela culture to the outside world. The Canela's engagements with Brazilian society have also led to interesting cultural hybridizations. While maintaining many core traditions, they've selectively adopted elements of mainstream Brazilian culture. For instance, some Canela have become enthusiastic soccer players, integrating the sport into their cultural life in uniquely Canela ways. Similarly, while the majority of Canela continue to live in their traditional territories, a small but growing number have moved to urban areas for education or work. These urban Canela play an important role as cultural brokers, helping navigate relationships with Brazilian institutions while maintaining connections to their communities. The Catholic Church and various Protestant denominations have also had a significant presence in Canela territories. The Canela's engagement with Christianity has been complex and varied. Some have embraced Christian beliefs, often integrating them with traditional spiritual practices in syncretic forms. Others have maintained more distance from Christian influences. This religious diversity within the community has created both challenges and opportunities for cultural adaptation. One of the most significant recent developments in the Canela's interactions with Brazilian society has been their increasing political engagement. In recent years, several Canela have run for local political offices, seeking to gain more direct influence over policies that affect their communities. This marks a shift from earlier strategies that focused more on working through intermediaries or advocacy groups. The Canela have also been actively involved in discussions about the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in Brazil. They've advocated for stronger protections for indigenous languages, cultural practices, and self-determination. These efforts reflect a growing assertiveness among the Canela in claiming their rights as both indigenous people and Brazilian citizens. Education continues to be a key site of interaction and negotiation with Brazilian society. The Canela have pushed for more culturally appropriate curricula in schools on their territories. They've developed programs to train Canela teachers and produce educational materials in the Canela language. At the same time, increasing numbers of young Canela are pursuing higher education in Brazilian universities, bringing new knowledge and skills back to their communities. Healthcare is another area where the Canela have had to navigate complex relationships with Brazilian institutions. While they've benefited from access to Western medicine, they've also worked to maintain and revitalize traditional healing practices. Some Canela have trained as health agents, learning to bridge traditional and Western medical systems. They've also advocated for more culturally sensitive health services that respect Canela beliefs and practices around birth, death, and illness. The COVID-19 pandemic brought new challenges to the Canela's relationships with Brazilian society. Like many indigenous communities, they were particularly vulnerable to the virus due to limited access to healthcare and higher rates of pre-existing conditions. The pandemic highlighted long-standing inequalities and the need for better health infrastructure in indigenous territories. However, the Canela also demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of this crisis. They drew on traditional knowledge of medicinal plants to boost immunity and treat symptoms. They used their strong social networks to implement community-wide protective measures. And they leveraged their relationships with NGOs and government agencies to access information and resources. Looking to the future, the Canela face both opportunities and challenges in their ongoing interactions with Brazilian society. Climate change, political instability, and economic pressures continue to threaten their lands and way of life. Yet they've also gained new tools, allies, and strategies for asserting their rights and preserving their culture. The Canela's journey offers important lessons about cultural resilience, adaptive strategies, and the complexities of indigenous rights in the modern world. Their ability to maintain core cultural values while selectively engaging with outside influences challenges simplistic notions of tradition versus modernity. Instead, they offer a model of dynamic cultural continuity, where identity is constantly negotiated and reinvented in response to changing circumstances. Moreover, the Canela's struggles and successes highlight the ongoing importance of indigenous rights and cultural diversity in Brazil and beyond. As the world grapples with environmental crises and social inequalities, the knowledge, practices, and perspectives of peoples like the Canela become ever more vital. Their story is not just about the past or present of one small group, but about the future of human diversity and our collective relationship with the natural world. As we conclude our exploration of the Canela people, it's clear that their story is far from over. They continue to face challenges, adapt to new circumstances, and assert their unique identity in the complex tapestry of Brazilian society. Their journey reminds us of the resilience of indigenous cultures, the ongoing struggle for land rights and self-determination, and the rich diversity of human ways of being in the world. The Canela's experience offers valuable insights for other indigenous groups facing similar challenges, for policymakers working on indigenous rights and environmental conservation, and for all of us seeking to build more just and sustainable societies. As we face global challenges that require new ways of thinking about community, ecology, and human flourishing, the Canela offer inspiring examples of alternative possibilities. Their story challenges us to question our assumptions about progress, development, and the relationship between humans and nature. It invites us to imagine different ways of organizing society, managing resources, and finding meaning in life. And it reminds us of the crucial importance of cultural diversity in our increasingly interconnected world. As we look to the future, the Canela's ongoing journey of cultural resilience and adaptation will undoubtedly continue to offer valuable lessons and inspiration. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of indigenous knowledge, the importance of land rights for cultural survival, and the potential for creative engagement between traditional and modern ways of life. In a world grappling with environmental crises, social inequalities, and loss of cultural diversity, the Canela remind us of the wealth of human possibilities that still exist. Their struggle for survival and self-determination is not just their own, it's part of our collective human story, and its outcome will shape the future of our shared planet. As we conclude our exploration of the Canela people, several key insights emerge that have broader implications for our understanding of human culture, society, and our relationship with the natural world. First, the Canela's egalitarian social structure and matrilineal kinship system challenge our assumptions about the inevitability of hierarchy and patriarchy in human societies. They show us that it's possible to organize communities in ways that distribute power more evenly and give women significant authority and autonomy. Secondly, the Canela's profound ecological knowledge and sustainable subsistence practices offer crucial lessons for environmental conservation and sustainable living. Their intimate understanding of their ecosystem and their view of plants as kin to be nurtured rather than resources to be exploited provide a powerful alternative to exploitative approaches to nature. The Canela's spiritual beliefs and practices, including their messianic movements, demonstrate the dynamic nature of indigenous spirituality and its role in helping communities navigate cultural change and external pressures. They remind us that spirituality can be a source of resilience and adaptation, not just a static set of traditions. The remarkable cultural resilience demonstrated by the Canela in the face of tremendous external pressures offers important insights into how societies can maintain their core identity and values while adapting to changing circumstances. Their ability to selectively incorporate outside elements while maintaining their distinct culture challenges simplistic notions of tradition versus modernity. The Canela's ongoing struggles for land rights and self-determination highlight the continuing importance of indigenous rights in our contemporary world. Their story underscores the intrinsic link between cultural survival and control over traditional territories. Finally, the Canela's creative engagements with Brazilian society and global networks in recent years show how indigenous peoples can assert their rights and perspectives on the global stage. Their involvement in environmental conservation efforts, their use of new technologies for cultural preservation, and their participation in international forums all point to new possibilities for indigenous advocacy and cultural revitalization. These insights from the Canela experience have profound implications for how we think about sustainable development, cultural diversity, and the future of human societies. They challenge us to question our assumptions about progress and to consider alternative models of social organization, economic activity, and human-nature relationships. As we face global challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, and growing inequality, the knowledge, practices, and perspectives of peoples like the Canela become ever more vital. Their story is not just about the past or present of one small group, but about the future of human diversity and our collective relationship with the natural world. The Canela remind us of the crucial importance of cultural diversity in our increasingly interconnected world. They show us that there are multiple ways of being human, of organizing society, of finding meaning in life. In a world that often seems to be converging on a single model of development, the Canela offer a powerful reminder of the wealth of human possibilities that still exist. Their ongoing journey of cultural resilience and adaptation will undoubtedly continue to offer valuable lessons and inspiration. As we seek to build more just, sustainable, and diverse societies, we would do well to listen to the wisdom of the Canela and other indigenous peoples around the world. We invite you, our viewers, to reflect on what you've learned about the Canela. How might their experiences and insights inform your own understanding of community, nature, and cultural identity? What lessons can we draw from their story as we face our own societal and environmental challenges? We encourage you to continue exploring these themes, to seek out more information about the Canela and other indigenous cultures, and to consider how you might apply these insights in your own life and community. Remember, cultural diversity is not just something to be studied or preserved, it's a living, evolving resource that can help us all imagine and create better futures. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of the Canela. We hope it has expanded your understanding of human possibilities and inspired you to think differently about culture, society, and our place in the natural world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep celebrating the rich diversity of human experience.